Hello, Goose here. Today we are putting ourselves through the lovely and wonderful and not stressful at all process of drawing James T. Kirk. First, I start with a small sketch on a big canvas. I just think it helps to get my shapes and everything jotted down better. It's just been my habit lately to start small and scale up, rather than start with something that's the full size of the canvas. When I have a decent sketch that I feel will give me a good outline to work with, I duplicate the layer and set the opacity low. The layer I paint on is going to be under the opacity sketch. I feel like if I have a good sketch and a good outline, then that will really help me kind of have everything else fall into place, because I started with a good base. I block out his silhouette and alpha lock the layer. I decided to have a golden greenish tone underneath since gold is a color associated with Jim, and I thought that building up the entire painting from that one color would help maintain a sort of cohesion throughout his hair, skin, and shirt. The only colors I used were the ones to the left. I sort of started with getting the basic flesh tones in, then getting some shadows in to build it up, then softening those out with some of the flesh tones, and just working these in layers just on top of each other. Things really started taking shape around this point, so I had the eyes in, the nose was starting to come together, the mouth just slightly starting to come together, so I started building in like save points like a video game where I would duplicate the layer that I was painting on and then just start from that new duplicated layer, adding things on top of it just in case I over-rendered and got a little too excited because I'm just feeling things out. And also I hadn't used this brush or really done too many realistic portraits in Procreate like this. And every time I do one, I have a entirely different process or way of going about it. So it kind of just ends up being more a thing about feeling than it is about the end result. The eyes are the first place I start adding detail just because it's the easiest place for me to start. And I wanted to try out not outlining the nose and mouth too strongly like I did the eyes, to see if they would come together naturally through just shaping with the brushes rather than specifically detailing where their lines are. So I was pretty soft with that this time. One thing that Procreate didn't capture in the kind of automatic screen recording is how much I flipped the canvas. I flipped the canvas a lot more than I ever do during this drawing because since I don't use precise rulers or grids or anything to do my sketches and get the proportions, I just eyeball it. I wanted to make sure that the mirror image was pretty consistently decent, so I would flip the canvas and draw and tweak with it flipped. And I also had a flipped version of my reference picture to kind of notice those details because things looked like they lined up differently when I flipped the canvas, and then when I flipped it back it looked pretty good still. So that's kind of how I worked for this one, trying out new and more patient ways of doing things because I tend to go fast through my process just to get ideas down rather than specific details. I was getting very physically tense at this point because it was turning out so much better than I expected. So I took a break to work on the hair and the shirt, which I thought would be less stressful. The shirt ended up being more stressful and maybe my least favorite part because it took so much more effort than I thought. Trying to get the texture down for the shirt, and I did my thing of over-rendering it when it was just barely at a good place that I could have worked from, but I didn't realize at the time. So yeah, the shirt was a struggle, but I think it turned out nice in the end. Like right here, I think that shirt looks really good. Just a tiny bit more like details in the collar and it would have been perfect. I feel like it had the right kind of fuzziness of the velour, but oh well. Here I'm adding in the eyelashes since the eyes were at a point where I felt like it was time to put them together and just finish them off for the most part. And so since I was adding the eyelashes and they extend from the side of his face on the right side, I unlocked the alpha layer, used the eraser to kind of sculpt that side of his face to the proper like shape because I had just roughly blocked it in just to get the color down. I was pretty surprised at how good Jim's hair turned out. I wasn't expecting it because I'm not a big fan of drawing hair, but the sides of it are so nicely sculpted. The waves in the front just kind of flowed. It just ended up being like super easy, surprisingly. Even adding the little highlights didn't throw it off too much as far as realism goes. So I was pretty proud of it. Pretty good job. Here's me rendering the shirt again. I was struggling with the collar, trying to make sure it had that ribbed texture come through because the folds of it weren't too much of an issue. It was really just the collar that just did not look like fabric that was bothering me. And I threw down some blues to kind of give it a bit more, to add dimension, just in the shadows that were there, and also the background, the setting was bluish, so, and also just to tie in some of the blues that I added to his face and things. So it kind of, I was trying to work out how to really build out that three-dimensional like cloth texture of the shirt. Once I got the shirt to a good place, I went back over the highlights with a white instead of the off-white, just to add that extra pop of color and like contrast. And then I added just a little bit more shadow on that side of his face, and here's some close-ups on his eyes and his nose, mouth. I think it looks pretty good, and it just kind of naturally took shape, which I'm proud of, so thank you.